This is Whole Backstage Live. This is Whole Backstage Live, and I'm here, excited to be here today with the one, the only Mr. Sonny Lewis, as we talk about his love of the theater, his support of the whole backstage and the arts in general, and his extensive history in what we call the biz, show business. So let's get started. Sonny, I really appreciate you taking some time to just sit down and talk about everything you have to share.
Okay,
You grew up in Gunnersville, right?
I did.
Okay.
I grew up I was born in 1935. And so I grew up over on Richardson Street. I was telling Johnny Brewer I grew up with his relatives. They were my best friends. They were my neighbors,
Wow.
the Joneses. So I lived with them practically. I just stayed up there. His cousin Bobby Neal Jones was my best friend. And I grew up back then. He had several sisters, so I was real close to all of them. And I grew up in Gunnersville and lived going to the movies. And when I'd go to the movies, I'd see my favorite movies were musicals. And I loved seeing, when they would sing and dance.
Did you have a favorite one?
I can't remember
Just
the name.
you just loved musicals in
I
general.
love the musicals in general. Gene Kelly, Marge and Gower, Champion.
Yeah.
And I'd go and I'd see the costumes, and I thought, now if I designed it, I'd do this and I'd do that. So I grew up knowing I wanted to be a costume designer. So it was the movies that influenced me that way.
Really?
Uh-huh.
Wow. Now, where on Richardson did you grow up?
I lived at the top back
Okay.
then, but now it's opened up. It keeps going. But do you know where the glass house is? It was built by Oliver Campbell for his wife. She was a hairdresser. They had a daughter named Barbara Jean Campbell, and her mother's name was Laverne Campbell, and she had the beauty shop in Gunnersville.
Mm-hmm.
And he built the house, and he built the old Harbor House. Remember the Harbor House that was down
I do, yeah.
The house that I'm talking about looked very much like that. Lots of glass overlooking the lake. Oliver Campbell built the house, and my folks were living over on Buck Island, and Mother was driving across the bridge in the wintertime, and it concerned me because the bridge would freeze over.
Mm-hmm.
So I talked her into buying the old Campbell house. So it's still there, and I bet you know it. It's 696 Richardson Street.
Okay.
It's all glass across the front. It's in the shape of a capital B.
I think I have seen that, yeah.
Uh-huh. Well, I love that house, and that's where I spent. Well, we lived right in front of that with my grandmother, but they turned that into apartments, and I think there's still apartments there in front of the Campbell house.
Okay. I know I have seen those apartments and that house. I know what you're talking about exactly. It's a little bit farther up. So that was the top then, and it's just kept going since.
Yeah, it sure did.
So what took you away from Gunnersville? I understand you spent some time in the military. Was that
I did.
first?
I was in the Army,
Mm-hmm.
and the Army sent me to supply school, and I didn't want to be a supply clerk, but I went to school to learn to be one. Well, they sent me out into California, and I remember I was on a train,
Mm-hmm.
and I thought, oh boy, California. Well, I don't know if you know Barstow or not, but Barstow's out in the middle of the Mojave Desert. And I thought, oh my goodness, this is California?
It didn't seem like
No, it didn't.
wasn't appealing.
Well, I was still in the Army, and I'd go into Los Angeles on the weekends. And I remember being in a bar one night, still had on my Army uniform, and I was talking to this fella, and this old gentleman was sitting close to where I was. And when I got through talking, he did this, and he wanted to come over and sit with him. And so I went over, and he said, are you from Atlanta? And I said, no, I'm from Alabama. And he said, "Well, you sound just like friends that I worked with when I designed the costumes for Gone with the Wind."
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "Really?" I said, "That's what I want to do. Is I want to be a costume designer." And he said, "Well, when you get out of the army and you go home, you bring your portfolio back and bring it and let me see it. I might be able to put you to work." His name was Walter Plunkett, and he did. He designed the costumes for Gone with the Wind, and he became a good friend.
That's great. What a chance meeting. I
Yeah.
mean, that's incredible. Had you already been designing at that point, just kind of
No,
on your own? So when he said, bring your portfolio, you said, well, I better get to work.
no, I had a portfolio because I went to Auburn and studied costume
Oh,
design.
good, good. Okay. So you
So,
already had something going.
so I had a portfolio. But anyway, when I got back on the way out there, I heard the Screen Actors Guild were on strike. So I got to California. Well, I didn't have a job. So he introduced me to a fellow named Lloyd Lambert.
Mm-hmm.
Lloyd Lambert was a costume designer mainly for Las Vegas. So I went to work for him, and he taught me how to make all those big feather headdresses
Yeah.
and little skimpy costumes. Well, I just loved it. And I remember the first headdress I made, the first costume that was at the New Frontier in Las Vegas. I thought I'd died and gone to heaven when my costume came out.
You got to see it on stage.
I got to see it on stage at the New Frontier.
Wow.
Yeah, and from there, I met a lot of designers. And I met a man named Bob Fletcher. And Bob Fletcher was designing a show called Laugh In. I don't know if you remember that
I
TV
do.
show or not.
I've heard, yeah.
Well, he hired me, and I went to work for him. And so I learned Joanne Worley, all those people on Laugh In, I got to be good friends with. And I met a lot of people through that show. And I met a man named Robert Fletcher, and he was Leon Ames' son. And so he was teaching at the University of California, Irvine. He was lecturing there once a week. And he said, "Sonny, why don't you come go with me? They're looking for a designer." So I went, and they hired me. From there, I met other designers and other big name stars. I met Barbara Streisand. I worked on Funny Girl.
Did you?
Uh-huh.
Wow.
And I remember thinking, "Oh, I just want to meet a movie star." Well, I was standing right next to her and didn't realize it was her.
Mm-hmm.
But I met a lot of people after I went to work for Robert Fletcher.
Now, what did you spend? Was a lot of the time when you, so you met the guy in L.A. and then you got to working on shows in Las Vegas. Is that just because of the the people you're working with? That's just where they were involved, or there was a type of show in the industry that they were working for
no,
that took you to Las Vegas?
Most of the costumes that were made for Vegas were made in Los Angeles. And I remember Lloyd Lambert doing these big headdresses and little tiny costumes. And I did a headdress, and I remember them coming and to get them. And it seems like some of them weren't ready. And so I went with Lloyd, and we delivered them to Las Vegas. And that was one of the high points of my life, seeing my costume come on stage.
Man. Yeah,
How
that's
big-
got to be an incredible feeling.
It was.
Who were some of your inspirations as far as getting through the industry, or the different moves you made? Was that just because of contacts you made or people you met, or?
Well, because I knew Robert Fletcher, I went to work on Laugh In, and from there, I went to work for the University of California at Irvine.
Was that lecturing as a designer?
Yeah, and
Okay.
teaching theatrical makeup. I worked there for 24 years.
Wow. And did you continue work on other shows as well as needed, or people contacting you, or just
No,
stayed right there at Irvine and taught
stayed
for?
taught.
Wow. So were you able to? Who were some of the students that you had that came through? Did did they go on to do some of the same type work that you did as
Well,
far
there's
as?
several of them said that they were going to wanted to do makeup.
Yeah.
And I said, well, you'll have to get into the union because it's, the union. And I said, and as far as I know, there are no females in that union, so go for it and get in there. I don't know if they did or not.
Hmm.
I never heard.
That's always an interesting dynamic as far as getting hired, whether you're in part of the union or whether they can even are allowed to hire non-union workers for that show or whatever.
Yeah.
I know that's always tricky
Well,
navigation.
I kept that. I belonged to that union long after I left because I paid my union dues. I had good insurance through that union.
Yeah,
So I continued to do that for years.
that's incredible. So when you moved to California, was that right after you got out of the Army to go pursue that?
Yeah.
How long were you in the Army?
I was active 2 years,
Okay.
and then I was inactive. I don't know for how many years. I can't remember.
Did that take you, were you stationed pretty much in one place as
Yeah.
far as?
Barstow.
Yeah.
I had a lot of friends that were in the Army.
And you spent some time in the desert for a few years and said,
Oh,
that's
yeah.
enough for me.
Oh, I'll tell you what, I love the desert. I learned to love it.
Yeah.
But I had no idea that California even had a desert.
I guess California's got a little bit of everything, don't
Yeah.
they? Depending
Sure.
on where you are.
Uh-huh. Well, I was in Barstow.
Mhm.
I remember getting off the train. I went to California on a train that had a sky roof. I remember
wow.
I could see out. It was all windows.
Yeah.
And getting off the train in Barstow, I thought, oh my goodness, this is California. And getting on a bus and going out to Camp Irwin. And of course, I didn't want to be a supply clerk.
Mm-hmm.
So I hung out in the service club, and I told the service club director, I want to be a costume designer, and I'd love to work in the service club and plan parties and decorate. And she talked to Major Graham, and the next thing I know, I was transferred from being a supply clerk to work in the service club.
That's great. So you got to kind of pursue some of what you were really wanting to do, even
Yeah.
in the Army,
Yeah.
and then had that contact waiting on you when you got out.
Yeah.
That's great.
I used to go into Los Angeles to round up girls for parties, for
Mhm.
dances, and I got to know a lot of people that way.
I bet. Did you do a lot of traveling in California when you were teaching?
Yeah, I went to Europe.
Okay. Where's one of your favorite places that you've traveled? If you had to pick one, or can you pick one? Is it?
Well, that's going to be difficult
Yeah.
to do. I loved Italy.
Mm-hmm.
I loved Rome. It's hard to say. I liked everywhere I went.
I know. I have been to Rome, and I guess my time in Italy was really brief. We traveled the whole time we were there, but I got to see Siena and Pisa and Florence and Rome, and places that
Yeah.
when they go to Italy, people say this is where we want to stop. That's where we stopped. So, but it was really, really neat. I can see how
Well,
Italy would stand out.
I loved Florence, Siena, Pisa.
Mm-hmm.
I liked everything about Italy.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Uh-huh.
Where else in Europe have you traveled?
Well, let me think. I didn't think about you asking me these things, and I had it on the tip of my tongue.
Sorry, I was just interested. When you say you went to Europe, that's always that part of the world has always interested me, and I've always loved the history there, the architecture. Everywhere you look, there's just hundreds of years of culture and history everywhere.
Well, I, of course, loved France
Mm-hmm.
and Italy and Spain I had friends that lived in Spain, so I visited with them. And one of the women that I worked with was a dance instructor, and she was going to be doing a dance recital, and she wanted me to go with her to study the costumes. I'll have to give this
Somebody
some
needing
thought.
your costume expertise.
Yeah, well,
Well, that's good though. That wherever you were, that was something that was upfront about you, and people knew. And when they thought about that, they thought we need to get Sonny involved, since that's what he's into and that's what he's pursuing. That's
yeah.
what he's.
Well, I studied the costumes, and I went to quite a few performances and really got to look at the costumes up close.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to think of where we were.
That's interesting though, to be able to get a close up look, at people's work, costume designers or the performers. I mean, that's the opportunity to get to see a show, a performance, and then get to look at the costumes up close and kind of
Uh-huh.
get a I guess a backstage look, a whole backstage look.
Yeah.
at that's really
Well,
neat.
some of the costumes that I worked on ended up here. They're hanging in the closet in the.
I've seen them. They're beautiful.
Well, Lloyd Lambert gave those to me. I worked on some of them, and I had them, and I didn't have any use for them, so I gave them to Dot. Dot and Denise came to the house one night, and I gave them those costumes, and I said, you can use them till they're worn out, but don't cut anything, because if you cut them, then it's gone. You
Yeah.
can't redo them. So you can take them in, let them out, but don't cut them.
Mm-hmm. But I don't know that they've even been. I think people have been trying to keep them as is.
Yeah, they were on stage in Will Rogers' Follies.
Yes, I remember that. That's that was really, really good, and the picture of you with all the costumes on stage is great.
But I'll tell you what, I had to do headdresses, and doing headdresses in Guntersville, Alabama. Where do you go to find feathers?
Great
Ostrich
question.
And sparkle. I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't find sparkle or feathers in Guntersville.
Can't imagine.
So I had to sort of make do with what I had.
Sure.
I thank goodness I brought a lot of feathers from California,
Good. Yeah.
thanks to the University of California at Irvine.
Yeah. Did you live in Las Vegas or just work?
Just worked.
Okay.
Lived in Los Angeles and worked on costumes and
Mhm.
would drive over and take them to Las Vegas,
Okay.
fit them on the girls. And they complained constantly about walking with the headdresses on. And I thought, well, this couldn't be too difficult. They said, but in heels? And I thought, well, my mother, that's all she ever wore were heels. So I didn't feel sorry for them because I thought you can learn to walk in heels. You can wear these headdresses.
Right. It's just an adjustment, small adjustment. Is it because now I'll be honest, I've never worn one that big. I don't know. Is it the weight? Are they a heavy, or are they do they get to go in their own direction and you have to figure it out?
Well, I don't know, but I thought it couldn't be that difficult.
Right.
So I didn't feel too sorry for those
Well,
girls.
they figured it out. So
Yeah.
now, what after you retired at Irvine, did you move back to Guntersville, or was there a period of time you stayed in California?
No, I went to work for the University of California because of Robert Fletcher was lecturing there, and they needed a costume designer.
Mm-hmm.
So they hired me to work there, and I moved down to Irvine, and I met this fellow named Errol Allen. The park is named after Errol.
Yeah, Errol Allen Park here in town.
He loved Guntersville, and he gave that park to the city. And we were living in Irvine,
Mm-hmm.
and he came home one day and he said, when you retire, we're moving to Guntersville. And I said, not me. It took me forever to get out of there. And he said, no, your mother's back there and you're all she's got. You're going to go back there. So I'm glad I did.
Yeah.
But I never dreamed that this school would be the whole backstage. We didn't have a theater when I was growing up. But I'm glad I moved back, and I'm glad to get involved. I got to know Dot more because of Errol. He was an actor. The studios wanted to hire him, I think, to be in westerns because he was so tall.
Really?
He was 6'7".
Wow.
He was really tall, but he loved Gunnersville more than I did, and I grew up here.
And when was it that you moved back to Gunnersville?
I want to say 59,
Okay.
but I'm not real sure about that. But I had retired from the university and moved back to Gunnersville. I believe it was 59.
So you got to know Dot after the whole backstage opened?
Yeah,
And did you get involved pretty much, let's see, it opened, I guess, it was the early 70s then.
I don't know when this opened, but Errol got involved with Dot Moore because he was in several of her shows.
Okay. And did she call on you to do any costuming?
No,
I hear it was difficult to tell her no if she got her mind on asking you for a favor.
she never asked me to do anything.
Well, so Errol was in several shows. He did Christmas Carol, correct?
He did.
Mm-hmm. So he bought the land where the park sits today
Uh-huh.
and dedicated it for that purpose.
We were walking out of Nina's. Do you know Nina's in the
I
basement?
do
of the-
remember Nina's, yeah.
Well, we were walking out there, and he said, "You know that lot over there on the corner where that store was, and it burned?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, I'm going to buy that and give it to the city for a park." And I said, "No, you're not." And he said, "Yes, I am." And so we were in Birmingham at a party, and he spent the whole evening talking to Connie Hembry. It was
Yeah.
a done deal. He had already done it.
Just took care of it.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. I mean, that's a great venue. We've talked about it on this show before because I've had John Harvey on, who played in Lake City Jazz,
Uh-huh.
and they've played there. Several bands have played there in the park, and the whole backstage has performed there in the park for different events to try to promote shows or just as a community event that they've invited us to, and it's just a great, especially at Christmas time when they
Oh,
put up
yeah.
the big Christmas trees.
And I bought that Christmas tree.
Did you?
Yeah, I was going by there one day, and they were putting that tree up, and I thought, whoa. I thought, well, if Errol can give the city the park, I could at least give the city the tree.
Yeah.
So I went running to Lee Dollar, and I said, "Lee, I want to buy that tree that's going up in Errol's park." So I did. I bought it.
Wow.
And I hope it lasts a long time. It better, because
I'm
it was
sure.
expensive.
Well, it looks great every time they put it up. You know, with the lights and the decorations they put on there. It's just another every season that park goes through. You know, I think the city does a good job of using it.
I think they do, too.
It was a really great idea and the forethought it took to see that lot with that burned out restaurant in it and
Yeah.
think, you know, what we need here is a good open air park for people to gather in.
Well, I had no idea what it was going to look like when Errol said, "I'm going to give it to the city for a park." And I said,
Mhm.
"No, you're not."
Yeah.
And he said, "Yes, I am." I didn't know it was a done deal.
It was already
It
done.
was already done. Well, Bobby Hembry was the mayor back then, and so Connie knew what she was talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. So with the whole backstage, Errol got involved with the whole backstage first, and then you were kind of involved just because of his involvement. Has the support of the arts always been a focus of yours everywhere you've been, or in every stage that's always been on the forefront of your mind?
Oh,
or-
yeah, it has. Well, I never dreamed I'd be so involved with it, but I'm glad I am. And I have a lot of good friends that are, of course, actors and costume designers.
Mm-hmm. Well, we sure appreciate all your support. And what's been some of your shows, your favorite shows that you've seen here?
Will Rogers Follies is my
Yeah,
favorite.
Absolute, yeah,
And it could be because I did the headdresses.
could be.
And I had all those gowns that were used that were
Mhm.
fitted that I guess, I don't know how much alterations they had to do, but they looked good on stage.
Yes. Well, I know I can speak for all the cast and directors when we say thank you for all your support in everything that we do season to season. I mean, it's a big help and a way for us to be able to provide the type of product that we want to put into the community to kind of enrich the community and give everybody an opportunity to be involved on every level.
Well,
Costuming and
I try to give money to the whole backstage in the museum. I never dreamed Gunners would have a museum, but I give them each
I'm glad we do.
$25,000 every year.
Yes, and we're very grateful for that here for sure. Like I was saying, it's to give everybody a chance to be involved, like you wanted to be in costuming, and people that we have involved in the studio side, the backstage side, as far as crew and set work and lights and sound and performers.
Yeah.
I mean, the people, when you hear, and a couple of people that have been on this show too, when you hear the history of somebody, maybe they wanted to be involved in theater, maybe they didn't, but somehow or another they got involved, and it changed them, and usually it's, you hear about the change for the positive, and we hope that's to continue that. That's why we do what we do, is just to give people an opportunity to grow and change and experience things and keep putting something positive out there.
Yep.
Am I correct in assuming that you have been a bit of an art collector over the years?
I have, and I just gave a whole bunch of art to the museum. And they came and got it, and they put it in storage because they didn't have a place to put it at
Really?
the museum. But I was in at an auction, and this art came up. I'm trying to remember who's the artist. I can't remember. But I thought, well, I'm going to bid on that piece.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I bid on it, and I got all of it. I didn't realize I was getting all 12 pieces, but I bid on it, and I got it, and I had an exhibit at the museum, and they put it in storage, and then I thought, well, I'm going to give that to the museum permanently.
Mm-hmm.
So it's in their storage. They rented storage space for it.
So it was exhibited, and then when they changed it out, they've stored it for now.
Yeah,
You
they
think
got it in storage.
Is it coming back out soon, do you think?
I hope so. I don't really know.
What's a favorite piece you have at your house?
Well, I'm a big collector of going to thrift stores.
Okay.
And I went to Leisure World in Los Angeles, and I found this oil painting, a religious artwork of the Christ child being handed from Mary to Saint Vincent. Anyway, this baby is being handed to this saint,
Mm-hmm.
and I bought it for $4.50. It's an oil.
Wow.
And I had these two women, friends of mine, that went to Europe every year to buy art. And they said, Sonny, let us take that with us up to Santa Barbara when we return home, and let the fellow there that cleans our paintings look at this and see if he can clean it, because it was dirty.
Mm-hmm.
And so he cleaned it, and he called me and told me to come by there and pick it up. So on my way up to Pismo Beach, I went by there, and a guy, and he said, Mr. Lewis, you've got an old master.
Wow.
And I thought, for $4.50, well, I paid $500 to him to clean it. But I was thrilled to death, and I've got it hanging in my house near the front door in case anything ever happens, I can grab it.
That's amazing. What a find. Do you look in thrift stores pretty much everywhere you go? Or?
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you found a lot of, what do you look for in art when you find, is it just purely, I like this, so I want to get it, or do you look for a specific type?
No,
or?
I just buy whatever I like.
Yeah. That's a good way to go. You hear about people who have such particular, especially in art, such particular tastes and preferences, and they only look for a certain artist or a certain type of art or type of painting. But that's,
No, I like all kinds. If it appeals to me, that's all that
yeah,
matters.
I love that perspective. And And I guess in the theater, people have similar perspective, whether it's musicals or drama or comedy. You have people who hone in on the one type of show that they like, and then you're a lover of all types.
Yeah.
So I love that perspective.
Well, I'll tell you what, I've learned if he has something to do with it, it'll be good.
That's true. Yeah. If it's a Johnny Brewer
Uh-huh.
production, it's
I'll
going
tell you,
places.
I've never been so proud of him as when they performed in Errol's Park.
Mm-hmm.
You remember that? I was so proud I knew him.
Yep. Yep. That's been a fun experience. I've gotten to perform over there a few times with Johnny, and I guess we were promoting Black Tie last time we did that get together, Broadway. Yeah, that was a great experience in the park and here. I mean, that was a great show, and we had a lot of great people involved. That's the thing about this theater specifically too. When you talk about all types of musicals or all types of shows, we have a tendency to attract all types of people here to this community theater to put on shows, and people from everywhere. I mean, there are people that drive, over an hour away sometimes just to come and perform, and that's not just for the shows. That's the rehearsals too, and it blows my mind, how the theater attracts people and who it attracts and how.
Well, I'm just so proud that Gunnersville's got a theater.
Yeah.
It's great.
Well, it's, I'm glad that this is here for Gunnersville and for surrounding areas. I mean, people come to perform from a long ways away, but they also come to see our shows.
Yeah.
From all over North Alabama. So
yeah. Well, you've had people here from California that saw shows.
Absolutely. Yep.
Because people have been here visiting me, and we come to the whole backstage.
That's part of the culture that we try to provide, is just to have that outlet for people, and to bring shows maybe that the area hasn't seen, and to give people that opportunity to spend time in the theater and see a musical or dramatic play that whether it communicates a message to people that makes them feel a certain way as they're watching it, or a comedy that just gives people an opportunity to relax. But that's, I'm just happy that this theater's here to provide those opportunities to the surrounding areas. I mean,
well, I'm proud that Gunnersville's got a theater.
Yeah, just that it's here.
Well, I wanted to say that Errol became very good friends with Dot Moore.
Mm-hmm.
And seeing that, I was told that those were her costume sketches. I didn't know Dot could sketch.
Yeah, well, we have several of her costume designs and poster designs in the building in different places. But yeah, when did he start doing shows here? Do you remember?
As soon as he got back
As
here,
soon as he got
back here, he got involved with the theater.
As soon as possible.
Uh-huh.
So they've been friends pretty much from the beginning of the whole backstage.
Well, from the time we came back in 59, Errol and Dot were like this.
Wow. That's great. Was Christmas Carol his favorite role, do you think?
I don't know. He was in several shows, but
Yeah.
I remember I've got pictures of him in that show.
I'm sure. I wish I had seen one of those. You mentioned Will Rogers. Errol did the voiceover for Ziegfeld
Yeah.
in that show, correct?
Uh-huh. I
Gotcha.
keep asking Jane Cole to do it again.
I'm sure it wouldn't be hard to talk her into it. I bet she would love to.
Well, she told me to talk to the board.
Okay. But yeah, that's interesting. That's your favorite show, and that Errol was involved in voicing that. That's good. But I've loved hearing about your history from moving from here to California and just pursuing what you knew you wanted to do the whole time, and meeting people that took you to different places in the industry. I mean, it's fascinating.
Well, I met a lot of famous people. We did costumes I worked for a big costume house,
Mm-hmm.
and we did costumes for Elvis Presley. We did costumes for Liberace
Yeah.
and I can't think of the names right now, but names, big names.
Well, and some of those influenced what became to be known as pretty much their a signature style for those performers, right? As far as Elvis goes and Liberace both. I mean, those some of the work you did ended up being what I guess became known as their a signature style of theirs at a particular point in
Yeah.
time.
Well, we made Elvis's costumes, and I hated them. I didn't like them at all. But I didn't like the designer that designed them either. But we made them in they're those ugly with the stand-up collars and the
Yeah,
little
yeah, yeah.
capes. Didn't like them at all.
But it was work.
It was work, and it kept me employed.
That's good. That's good. What element of it was it that you worked on? As
What?
far as you mentioned Liberace's
Oh,
also.
Well, he worked up the street. He had an antique shop,
Mm-hmm.
and Lloyd Lambert would put costume in the window,
Mm-hmm.
and Liberace would walk by there daily, and he'd see the costume, and he came in and he said, "Oh, well, I've got a tuxedo that I would love to have the lapels
Mm-hmm.
and the stripe down the pants and the cuffs beaded so they would sparkle. Could y'all do that for me?" And Lloyd said, "Yes." She said, "Sonny, that's the job for you."
Yep.
So at night I would sew beads on. And so that became Liberace's, introduced him to sparkle.
Wow. Wow. He said, "Can you make this sparkle?" And you were like, "Yep, I'm your man.
Uh-huh.
I can handle it."
Bugle beads.
Yeah. How many would you say?
Oh, thousands of bugle beads. They're little bitty things, and you had to have a special thin needle to go through them, and you put them on one at a time.
Oh my goodness. I can't imagine.
It was time consuming.
Yeah. How long do you think like if he said I want a pair of pants done, wanted a stripe down the leg on both sides, how long would that take you?
Well, if I stuck to it, it'd take me several evenings.
Yeah. I can imagine. So if he needed a whole suit done, it was a week or two.
Oh, well,
Three.
he would never do the whole suit, just the lapels
Right.
and the cuffs and then the stripe down the pants.
Yeah.
And Lloyd Lambert got the money for me doing it. But I got to know Liberace that way.
Right. Got to work on what you loved and
Uh-huh.
meet some neat people along the way.
I did. I met really nice people.
Yeah. That's great.
Barbara Streisand, one of them.
Mm-hmm.
I bought all the fabric. I was the shopper for that show. And I've got pictures of that, of her.
And when you're talking about Funny Girl?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So
I've
you were
got-
the
I went out and bought the
Yeah.
fabrics for that show, and the accessories. There was little bunches of grapes sewn on the number. I can't remember the name of the number they did, but they were on roller skates.
okay. So when I hear about things like that, where you remembered specifically the bunches of grapes sewn on, was that part of the, or do you remember if that was part of the original? This is the whole look we're going for, or was that like an afterthought where you're looking at it and saying we need maybe a little something else?
No. Well, I knew it was part of the original costume,
Mm-hmm.
but I thought, where do I go to buy artificial grapes?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it took me a while, but I finally found them. Oh, a whole new world. Found those artificial grapes and artificial flowers. It was a wonderful place to shop downtown L.A.
I was about to say, was that L.A. where you were
Uh-huh.
doing all that,
Yeah.
getting ready for that? Well, we can sit down and talk anytime you want to. I'm sure there's 1,000 stories for every one moment.
Well,
that
one thing brings back a memory, and that will strike up another memory.
yeah,
But I was out there almost 50 years,
yeah.
so a lot happened in that 50 years.
Well, that's great. I know we're glad you're here, and we've enjoyed getting to speak with you and getting to know you too. I know this. You have a rich history with the whole backstage, and we're appreciative of every moment of it. So,
Well, I'm glad I could do it.
yeah,
I'll tell you what's nice is giving that 25,000 every year and having a special parking place out there.
yeah, yes, yep,
Because at night when I come during the run of a show, I know I got a parking plus spot.
absolutely. We'll keep it open for you, as they say. Well, thanks again, and I really appreciate your time, really. And anytime you want to sit down and talk, you just let me know,
Okay.
and we'll make it happen.
All right. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Uh-huh.